Welcome back, Metalheads. Today I'm spinning the wax with Jamie Southern of Giant Walker, listening to Soundgarden's Super Unknown. Don't go anywhere, it all starts right now.
Maybe once, maybe twice, make it big times. Won't you heed my advice? With some foresight, don't you go and make me. Yeah, maybe we're just crazy.
Hello, my friends, and welcome back to Spinning the Wax, where we listen to your favorite artists' favorite records. My name is John Garcia, aka Stay Puffed, the Metal Marshmallow, and your friendly neighborhood headbanger. I am stoked to bring on my next guest, whose uncategorizable band hails from Newcastle, UK, and has been making noises that you can't help but pay attention to. Jamie Southern is the guitarist for Giant Walker, who just released their second full-length album, Silhouettes, last September, and it is a phenomenal album. The step up from their debut to this one should really put you on notice for this band. What I like about them is that they really are nearly impossible to classify. There's rock, there's metal, there's prog and grunge woven throughout their sound that, combined with the excellent vocals of Steph Fish, just mesh so well together. Big recommendation for Silhouettes right here if you haven't already heard it. Giant Walker also wears all of those influences on their sleeves, so it's no surprise that Jamie brings on Soundgarden's Super Unknown to the show. It's one of his favorite albums of all time, and we dive into the identity crisis that Chris Cornell and the band went through writing these songs and before recording the album, how producer Michael Beinhorn brought out the best in the band, and how there are just so many tracks on this one that grow and change with you across the years. They are somehow always there with you. Jamie also talks about knowing Steph, bassist Jordan Gregory, and drummer Alex Black for over a decade now, going back to their days in music uni, and how that time has sharpened their musical language as well as honed their live playing style. He also talks about his dislike for genres and how classmates at his music school really looked down on rock music for a lot of different reasons that we'll get into. I should also warn you that we have some very candid and honest conversations about mental health, depression, and suicide. Nothing disrespectful, nothing over the top, but it is just something that we can't avoid talking about given this band and this music. But it's nothing that's going to bring down the entirety of the episode, and in fact, we have a lot of fun listening to this record. So without further delay, here's my conversation with Jamie Southern while we listen to Soundgarden's Super Unknown. Hope you enjoy. Please welcome Jamie Southern to the program. My friend, it is so good to have you on. Technical issues and all. How are you doing, my friend?
Yeah, man, I'm doing well, doing well. Like I said, it's a bit chilly, but
Yeah.
yeah, luckily the technical issues happened before we listened to the entire album. And,
That's true. You always want everything to happen on the front end, and then you just hope that it's smooth sailing from right there, because we
yeah.
don't want Chris Cornell to be interrupted at any point of this interview or anything.
No, never.
So before
No.
we get in to talking about Soundgarden and everything like that, tell the good people, what it's been like, on your side of the world, coming up in Newcastle and starting this band and everything like that. And then I guess we'll talk a little bit about how you've been feeling now that your second album is out into the world and is getting a lot of buzz and a lot of good reception and everything like that, which congrats on that.
Well, thanks, man. Appreciate that. Yeah, it's a bit of a weird one, man. Like, obviously, as a group of individuals and musicians, we've been playing together for a long time, like well over 10 years at this point. But as Giant Walker, it's kind of still fairly fresh, and it definitely wasn't something that I expected, like, to happen so quickly.
Sure.
Early in the kind of infancy stage of the band, really, it's just really. It's just always a really good vibe, and yeah, I mean, I couldn't be happier with how the second albums came out, and really think it's just an extension of what we have to say as a band, really. And like I say, we really wear the influences on the sleeve as well. So as we'll probably listen through the album, I'll be able to point out some interesting things that we've stolen.
I love no. Do we?
But
All artists that I have on here talk about their stealing or accidental borrowing or whatever of different
everyone
things.
does it, man.
Of
Everyone
course,
does it.
and something that I'm curious about. So you mentioned that everyone in this band has been playing together in like kind of some form or whatever for 10 years or something like that, and obviously that sound or the scene is very well knit across the UK, but it definitely feels like there have been a lot of people that have been playing for a little bit and then find that kind of like magic sauce or whatever it is. Do you think that that's kind of like, for friends of yours that are in bands, do you think that's kind of how they've done stuff as well, where it's just they've been playing in bands for 10 years and then all of a sudden some people that they knew and they've been growing up with, it just clicks and something happens?
Yeah, I think there's definitely an element of, well, one of the big ones to tie it back into the weather is that the weather's not great. So I think there's a lot of time to spend indoors. Boredom ultimately just
Sure.
breeds some kind of creative output. Yeah, I don't know if that answers exactly what you were asking, but I think
Yeah, well,
it's sort of like,
let me rephrase the question a little bit because I can get like a little bit wordy and meander everything, problems of having ADHD and whatever. But as far as what were the kind of things that the rest, you and Steph and everybody else in the band were doing previous, as far as like playing in sounds and shows or whatever, before you kind of gelled into what is now Giant Walker? Because you're saying you've been playing together before you officially were like Giant Walker. Like, what was that time like, and how did you kind of discover yourselves, and how did that ultimately lead to now 2 albums with this band?
well, it's exactly as you said. It was spent discovering ourselves, really. I mean, we all obviously went to music. We met at kind of music university, which is very it can tend to be a bit highbrow and a bit kind of
Yeah, sure.
it's a bit snobby in places, especially if you where we were, it was kind of slightly looked down on if you're into the kind of rock thing.
Interesting.
It was very much like if you weren't into, it was very like neo soul and funk and jazz, and I mean jazz is obviously meant to be the ultimate kind
Of course, like the most pretentious of the pretentious genres.
Well,
that you can get.
you said it.
No shade to anybody like jazz, right? Jazz is great, but let's just like with plenty of metal people could be closed-minded or whatever, right? Jazz has a lot of like high persnickety, snobbish people,
Yeah, exactly. And I think we were playing to obviously started a band, which before Giant Walker, and we were just kind of experimenting. And because we were at music university, a lot of the songs were kind of like, oh well, I've wrote a song based on what I learned this week, and it was just very experimental and kind of. But through that, we gigged a hell of a lot, gigged so much, and I think through that, you just, I mean, I always say that's the best practice you get, because ultimately playing in a room with other people is the goal, to create music and to understand. It's almost, when you're playing with other musicians as well, it is like you're basically just talking to each other in a different language.
Sure.
And the more you do it, the more fluent you are in that language. And music it's exactly like that. So I think we spend all of that time learning the language, so to speak.
I love and when I've had other musicians on, they've said that as well, like, having a conversation with each other with instruments or anything like that. And that makes a lot of sense given just the kind of the groove and the nature of Giant Walker and the sound, especially on Silhouettes. Like, there's definitely that you can tell that it's just like, the whole band moves kind of like with the breeze and everything like that. And I'm sure we'll talk about that going forward. But that makes a lot of sense that you've cut your teeth as a band with gigs and kind of know how each other speaks and everything like that, just given the way that the songs flow and everything like that.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we did it for, like I say, close to 9-10 years.
Yeah.
And then before Giant Walker. So hopefully, like I say, in the songs, and especially if you see we're live, I think that comes across that we've been playing together for so long.
Hell yeah. Okay, cool. So let's get, I'm going to pick your brain about this band and about your history and everything like that as we get in, but let's talk about you mentioned wearing your influences on your sleeve and everything like that. And I think if, someone comes across Giant Walker, listens to them, maybe Soundgarden might not be on the top of their mind when you start, but certainly if you listen to Soundgarden and then listen to Giant Walker or whatever, know Soundgarden, you can definitely start to hear that influence in there. So tell me, we're going to be listening to their seminal album, Super Unknown. which you said is probably your favorite album of all time, if not up there. Why, Jamie, do you love this record?
Oh man. I mean, I think first things first. I really do think at this point in time, they were literally the perfect band in terms of like what every member brought at the table. They all contributed loads to writing the songs, and man, just everything like production, songwriting. Obviously, I feel like at this point in time as well, Chris Cornell was kind of untouchable
Yeah.
in terms of like I just think he was in a bit of a league of his own in terms of just rock frontman kind of singing.
Mm-hmm.
And not only that, what he did with some of the absolute filth and dirge and dark, moody, some of the guitar parts, and he just soars over the top of it. And again, kind of to tie it kind of back into Giant Walker a bit as well, like that's something we always try to do is kind of, no matter how dark and kind of filthy it gets, to always have that element of like, you can always just listen to the singer who sounds quite nice,
Yeah.
singing over the top of it all. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I think that's like a really big inspiration to me. Is just how they tied all of the elements together. Even though some of it's quite rogue, you know, some of the guitar parts and some of the instrumentation.
You know, with my journey with Soundgarden, I'm curious to hear the listener's journey with Soundgarden as well. Spinningthewax@gmail.com if you want to let me know. You know, certainly with the newer generation of music listeners may not have even been around when this is going on. You know, Soundgarden broke up for a little bit. Not too, you know, they had a follow-up after this, but then they broke up for a good chunk of like when I was just getting into music. So they had a mystique around them because they're not around anymore. And you're right, his voice sometimes with how bleak the subject matter is, how dark and dirgy and almost sludgy at times some of the music is, in that it really is like, you know, leaving a window open and having kind of like a breath of fresh air come through to just lift you out, all of that. And sometimes he's singing about like the most, you know, horrendous, depressing shit, but you're still like, all right, yeah, this song grooves, like, let's go.
Yeah.
And as far as guitaring and like musicianship and stuff like that, what did you take away from this, and kind of how did this inspire you to you know, follow the path that you know you did and are on right now?
Yeah, I mean, a big one is the riffs. Basically, a lot of the chord progressions and riffs are just so unique, and part of the reason for that is the Soundgarden in particular have a history of delving into really quite wacky alternative tunings.
Mm-hmm.
So nothing's really in standard tuning. It's not, and obviously people go talk about drop D being like a really common guitar tuning for the alternative metal thing, but they like I basically stole a tuning from them, which is quite prominent on this album, and it's quite odd. It's kind of like it's a bit of a hybrid between a couple of tunings, and I'll point it out when we get to the songs as well, with what songs this tuning is on. But as soon as you tune your guitar to that tuning, I love doing that because, number one, it's not familiar. Standard tuning, you kind of immediately have the goalposts. You know where all your reference markers are. If you completely remove all of that, you don't have any references, so you have to go on, that sounds cool, I don't know what chord it is, I could work it out, but I'm not going to, like, do you know what I mean?
It's like you're putting your fingers in a different, it's almost like you're speaking in a different accent or like a different language, I guess, to bring it back on that, because like, you know, I'm a rudimentary guitar player, right? Like I play mostly in the standard tunings, but I have done some open C every once in a while. And as soon as you do that, it's just like, wow, every single thing that I'm used to just doesn't work anymore. And you've got to figure things out. Yeah, I know what you're saying.
Absolutely, and I mean that's a massive one. This album, man, has so many tunings on it, and I think there's songs in tunings. I mean Zeppelin as well were a band that did it, and I think obviously Soundgarden quite clearly probably took it from there as well.
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's just that was a big one, like incorporating that tuning into our stuff. And again, it's quite nice knowing, like, yeah, man, my favorite band ever, like, use this tuning. So
Fuck
it's
yeah.
good enough. It's good enough for them. Then, yeah, know what I mean. Like, if anyone's thinking about doing the deep dive on the album, just enjoy the journey. And I think, try and think of it as an experience. Because, like you said, it's not something that happens all the time. It's a very single, heavy world out there now. So yeah, just try and take it all in at once.
Yeah, especially if someone, is just familiar with like Spoonman or Black Hole Sun or like Fell on Black Days or something like that. Adding the other things in there definitely gives you a much different experience than just what you may think of as like the popular Soundgarden or something like that.
Yeah, man, absolutely.
All right. So
do it.
let's do this. This is Soundgarden's Super Unknown. I was doing a little bit of kind of perusing of their albums because, like I said, I've listened to like Bad Motorfinger, obviously. I listened to the album after this. Their earlier discography, not something I'm too familiar with. And I was kind of struck when you listened to the album before this one, how different Chris Cornell's voice seems from this one. He seems a lot higher in that one, and this one he really settles down. I don't know if that's because of the tuning or the subject matter or whatever, but like, how do you feel like this album kind of separates itself from what Soundgarden had done up to this point?
Well, I think a massive one was I remember Chris Cornell had a bit of an identity crisis in the middle of writing this one.
Yeah.
I remember watching a video with a guy called Michael Beinhorn, who was the producer.
Yeah.
And he was basically saying Chris Cornell did a load of demos for the album, and then Michael Beinhorn had to listen to them, and he was like, "It sounds like you're trying to write Soundgarden songs in a weird way. Like, oh, it sounds contrived in a way.
Sure.
Like he's trying to." And Chris Cornell said he was like, "Oh well, it's maybe people want." Is that not what people want to hear? They want to hear Soundgarden songs, like the next iteration of Soundgarden songs. He was kind of saying like, the fans they're there for you. They're not there for you to recreate just what you've done before, because you've done it before. And then allegedly after that conversation, he came away with, he sent some more demos over, and it was like Black Hole Sun, Fell on Black Days, all of this kind of like basically all of the singles of the album. And he was like, there we go. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think that is a big one. I think he stopped trying to maybe appease fans so much and tried to start just appeasing himself a bit more, which I know it's a really hard thing to think about, because ultimately that's what art has to be. It has to be true
and we
to
talk
yourself.
about this a lot, but it's something that I'm really curious about with anyone who's gotten to a point where their art is being judged, either commercially or artistically, critically, like whatever it is, about doing what you want to do versus what's expected of you. And, how many stories have we heard, just like the one that you just said, Jamie, where when someone lets go of what they think people want to hear, it, pushes them to a different realm, because that is ultimately, I was going to say genuinicity, but that's not a word. Genuinism, how about that? Is what people really latch onto. And how do you think you've kind of frame that in your mind as you've kind of gone out in the world and seen more people starting to listen to your music? And obviously, even before that, when you're just a dude writing music that wanted to get his shit out in the world.
Yeah. When I first started, it was very much try and copy what you're hearing.
Of course.
And as you, it's a funny one, like, to be honest, just trying to develop your own sound, because it's a bit cringe to talk about it. Or maybe is it? I don't know. It's
not on this show, sir. You talk about whatever the fuck you want.
Well, I think to assume that you've developed your own sound, I suppose, and I would hope that I've got to a point in my musical life where I can kind of identify myself in things. But I think getting to that point is really hard, because, like you say, you a lot of the time it's that battle of, oh well, I want to sound like this guy, because this guy's my favorite guy. And I think bands struggle with that as well. Obviously, even Soundgarden clearly struggled with it, because they were like, oh well, we need to sound like this Sabbathy thing, though, like with Bad Motorfinger and the albums that came beforehand. Even before Bad Motorfinger, it was quite Zeppelin-y and quite
Zeppelin, even like, I would say probably not a direct one-to-one, but kind of like even like Mr. Bungley, where it's like kind of some nonsensical sounds, and there's weird time shit that they're doing, and like all of this other stuff where they weren't really like, and maybe this is not a correct observation, but it felt like they weren't a serious band. When you look at Super Unknown, you see what they're like, holy fuck, this is some real shit. Whereas you look at their earlier stuff, it's like they were just having fun, doing some drugs and getting music out there.
100%. I mean, if I was to relate it to my experience as well, it kind of those early albums kind of feel like our pre-Giant Walker era, if you know what I mean, like
absolutely,
playing live, experimenting a lot, and that's what it sounds like. It sounds like they're really finding themselves. And then all of a sudden, I feel like with Super Unknown, they just landed on something that was just so like, this is Soundgarden, you know? And they weren't necessarily trying to write a Soundgarden song. They were just trying to write, I don't know, whatever they wanted. I think it's hard removing those barriers of what are people going to think though? Does it sound like Soundgarden, you know?
Yeah.
And the reality is it will sound like Soundgarden because you are Soundgarden.
100%, dude. Yeah, like ding the bell on that one because that is that's the point. I mean, you mentioned Michael Beinhorn. I know that there was some kind of maybe not back and forth, maybe not fights, but I know that his production style and the way that he pushed them on this record was definitely something that they weren't used to. Like they wanted to get their sounds down and then go, and he was like, "No, let's do it again, refine," which you kind of mentioned with the way that he approached Chris Cornell about the demos and everything like that. And I wonder also if that obviously had to play into that as well, just finding a producer that was trying to get them to sound like them as opposed to what he wanted them to sound like.
Yeah. I mean, that's the job of a producer, isn't it?
Exactly.
Ultimately,
yes.
Is to really just bring the best out of the band. And I think, that he's just done an absolutely unbelievable job, to be honest, because it's hard. I can imagine. I mean, imagine the absolute nuts you have to tell Chris Cornell, "Nah, these demos are a bit shit, mate.
Do it again." That didn't sound quite right. Do it again.
Exactly. Like, I mean, I'd be like, "Yeah, it's great," So, I mean, yeah, that is the job of a producer ultimately. Funny enough, this song actually, you told us to point out some alternative tunings. This one, My Wave, is one of the ones where it's like E E B B B B B. It's just literally tuned.
It does. When I see
B.
that as someone who again kind of knows how to play guitar, I'm just like that. How does that even sound like this? It makes no sense. And like this song is very much like that kind of like breath of fresh air. It's very bright, almost summery before we get into Fell on Black Days, which is the exact opposite. So I think that for me, I know that the band said that there were a couple of songs that they didn't want to cut. I feel like there were probably a couple that maybe if I had my producer hat on and was being extra fucking thing. But again, we listened to Dirt and I was like, listen to me critiquing a masterpiece, right? Like, who the fuck am I? But yeah, the sequencing on this album is great. And I think this, starting with a song like My Way, it's the second song, but starting early with a song like this before getting into the really deep, dredgy stuff was a really good idea.
Absolutely, yeah. Like you said, it's a bit of a brighter number.
It's kind of boppy too. The
really,
man.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this last bit as well almost sounds like you can almost see Beatles influences in it, like with the constant delay rolling vocals, almost like a loop, like when the Beatles used to do those like tape machine loop things. Like I just think it's interesting trying to speculate on like where they might have been influenced as well. I think ultimately, if people are going to listen to our music and try and pick out where the influences are, they might not always be in where they expect them to be. And I think that last little bit in that song is a good bit to.
Yeah, it's Giant Walker by way of Soundgarden by way of Beatles or something like that.
Yeah.
Everything's kind of filtered through a lens or whatever, right? Because what is music other than just kind of building on what you've heard previously before you?
Right. That's it, isn't it? It's just subconsciously it's just your take on something else, I guess.
We're on Fell on Black Days right now, and this guitar tone, like how you can tell the strings were new, and how you can just hear the pick going across them, and just the resonance in it. I melt every time I hear this song.
Oh, it's absolutely stunning, man. Like I bought a Gretsch just because of Soundgarden, because they recorded the whole album using a Gretsch, and it's that glassy, just super articulate kind of. If you've got if just as a studio tool, if you're ever laying down some kind of some more chordy things, Gretches just give you that what you're listening to.
Noted. I don't think I've ever played a Gretsch before.
Oh man, yeah, that's stunning. When you get a good one, they really are stunning. I remember again Michael Beinhorn saying like they used the Gretsch for everything basically because it was just effortlessly sat in a mix, and
there you go.
Didn't have to do much to it.
This riff right here seems so fucking simple, and even when you look at tabs of it, it seems simple. but then you're just like, but what is coming out of me is not coming is what it is like. Or I guess it gets into just the fingers as intonation and like the technique of a player and all that stuff. Where I mean, you can't be Kim Thayil on this one, right?
No, I mean that's it, man. The devil's in the detail, and I think that's half of the problem with. I think a lot of guitar players learn things using tabs now,
Yeah.
and I think the problem is tabs and music notation in general. I think is very just do this. It's like but the problem is there's an extra kind of 10, even 20% where it's about, okay, well, how much do I bend that note? Like there's imperfections in recorded music as well. So it's like, if you listen to it more kind of critically, you're like, oh, well, he bent that quite sharp, actually. He actually didn't play that so well, and it's about trying to recreate those really raw moments that are so unique to the player is borderline impossible because you're not them.
Right.
And that's ultimately, you can drive yourself mental by being like you said, like, oh, I don't sound like that though. Like that's really cool, but
it's like the meme from Iron Man where it's like Tony Stark built this in a cave with rudimentary parts, and the guy's like, I'm sorry, I'm not Tony Stark, right? And I think back to your point about gigging, right? You learn all of that type of stuff, and that, the extra swing and the feel and going with the wind, or where the emotion or the groove is and stuff like that, doing that where, right? Like you can read words from a page if you're an actor, but unless you're trying to understand what the words are saying and what the sentence is conveying and how it's not going to sound alive. It's just going to sound, just kind of like flat music,
Yeah, 100%. And like I said before, like it's all in the details, the minutia, the little kind of just the inflections, the articulations, like just all they're different. You could line 5 guitar players up, get them all to play this riff. They're all going to sound different, and they're not going to sound like that either. But yeah, I mean, this more.
Yeah, oh, it's so
good. It's just. Yeah, and honestly, man, like a lot of this stuff as well, like he was obviously singing about like such dark stuff at the time as well, and it's funny how after someone dies, especially tragically in the way he did, there's always an element. I don't know. You never hear anyone say, "Yeah, I expected it." Like I don't think I've ever heard anyone say like, "Yeah, I could see that the writing was on the wall." Like I could see that happening, and it's always tragically never expected. What? Him, like, of all people? And the songs definitely hit different after that, like hearing the lyrics and hearing maybe just, I don't know, it in hindsight now, it's like, oh, he was just singing about himself, man, and all these internal struggles.
Absolutely. I'm glad that you brought this up because I knew that it was going to come up, but obviously just like when will it come up and everything like that is because, I mean, I remember listening to this record, just after he died, and just so many things, just you look at it in a different light. And it's interesting. My partner and I were watching some old episodes of No Reservations with Anthony Bourdain, who also, I believe, like passed away around this time from a similar manner. And same thing as far as like some of the monologues he has with some of the things he's just like, I cook because it's the best way to get me out of my thoughts and getting away from, depression and this and that. And, it's a little bit more nuanced than that. But hearing that from an episode 10 years ago or what it is, but then knowing what happens, it hits you in a different way and, makes it, I think makes this art even I don't want to say more special because that makes it sound like, it's a good thing that they passed away now that there's more shit, that you can see on their art. But it just, I don't know. It just makes things a little bit more powerful, I guess, knowing that someone was
more profound and a bit more, just has a bit more impact. I mean, the same thing happened with Kurt Cobain, didn't it?
Sure, yeah. Chester Bennington with Linkin Park and everything. If you listen to some of the early Linkin Park records, hearing how much he was struggling, what was going on with that, and it's just like it sucks to know when because like I struggle with depression and anxiety, and like I've lost days sometimes because I can't get out of bed and all that stuff, and thankfully I've never gotten to a point where like I've actively wanted to harm myself or made a plan or anything like that, but certainly to say that I haven't like thought about suicide or something like that is not true at all, because it's like, you know, a consideration, yeah, that's not for me, I'm not going to do, you know, and then just like go on. But I have been in a spot where like it's like it is crossed my mind as just
Yeah.
like a thing that is there, right? As I'm sure that many people have with, you know, even though whether they want to say it or not. And I know that this is a really tough subject to talk about, but you know, when you hear, you know, when you struggle with something and know how hard it is to, you know, put your foot in front of yourself every day, and then you see someone you look up to or is such a big person in someone's lives, and you say, oh fuck, they didn't make it, you know, that like they succumbed or whatever. It's just so sad and profound. I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, man. And I mean, it kind of, I mean, from the outside looking at someone like Chris Cornell, at least me, I'm like, God, like the absolute legacy, the career, the songs that this guy has been involved with.
Mm.
And like I say, pretty much my hero throughout my whole musical life. And then for him to do that, you're like, that to me
Yeah.
is why it's so much deeper than just, because from the outside he had everything. Do you know what I mean? Why in the world would he do that? But I think to comprehend it, you can't.
You can't.
Because
No, you
ultimately,
can't.
I've never been in that situation.
Sure.
And I think people who, I mean, I just think it's a ridiculous opinion to say that something like that's selfish or, because yeah, on face value, he's left behind like a stunning family and whatever, but then just, you can't even imagine the mental state someone has to be in to.
That's
actually do
literally
that.
what I
You know
was
what I
going to
mean?
say, as far as like that's what fucks me up the most,
Yeah.
as far as like, you know, whether it's, you know,
Yeah.
friends or celebrities or even just like people that I don't know. You hear about this and you're just like, man, how bad must have things been inside to where that they thought that that was the best release or the best thing that they could do, as
Yeah,
far
yeah.
as like all of the other options, and I just can't comprehend it, and it's fucked, man.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Yeah, I mean, going back to the song I just played, Mailman, like some of the stuff, like the lyrical content in that song, like I just always loved how it was quite real in the sense that like the song's about basically a mailman, a
Mhm.
postal worker who's really just in the most rotten position in his life, gets treated like shit by all his co-workers, and then one day decides to just go into work and kill everyone.
yeah.
Um,
That was going postal. That was a thing in the U.S. for a little
Right.
bit. Like that's where that phrase comes from, because
Yeah,
there was a
yeah,
time where
yeah.
like postal workers were just going nuts and like shooting people all the time.
Yeah, man. And I just think as well, like lyrically, how he inferred like just different emotions. That line, I know I'm heading for the bottom, and then the next line is, but I'm riding you all the way,
Yeah.
as if to say like, well, I'm going to kill you and then kill myself because I know I'm heading for the bottom.
If I go, I'm taking with you. I have the lyrics up too. And it was,
Exactly.
you know, the last verse before going into that is, you know, my place was beneath you, but now I'm above, and now I send you a
Yeah.
message of love, a simple
Yeah.
a reminder of what you won't see, a future so
Yeah.
wholly without me. It's just like fuck, man, that's
Yeah,
dark as
man,
fuck.
it's-
But like, you don't even realize it when you're listening to it.
But not only that, the juxtaposition between the big difference is it's played over like a sleazy like guitar riff, and he's singing it as if it's like it was sang in a really seductive kind of way, and
Yeah.
it's just all kinds of wrong basically. But those are the kind of things that make the most impact.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing that makes like this album too. Because like who sounds like this? Who has done anything like this before, since? And how many people have tried to ape what has been going on here? Whether they just want to be Soundgarden, or whether they're like, oh no, like I play in a sludge metal band, but I also want to incorporate what Chris Cornell did into this sound too.
But it's so hard to do that because there's so many subtleties that I think people would generally miss
Yeah.
on first listen, or like I say, there was that lyrical content and just the detail in the delivery of like lines. And I mean, obviously he's just probably didn't really know he was doing it himself, but I think you can definitely analyze it after the fact and be like,
Sure.
why did he choose to sing that note like that? Because it has, like I say, this kind of quality to it, even though he's singing about something that emotionally is this. So it should sound like this.
This is a track though. This is gonna be
Oh,
stuck in
super
my
under.
that twang, like they're almost like a southern rock band. Fuck yeah, dude.
But again, like it's played that way, but then harmonically, it's quite an interesting scale. It's kind of like this
Yeah.
Phrygian mode vibe, which is generally, again, so typically dark. And like this is what kind of bothered me when I was at uni as well. Is there was this kind of like I said before, a bit highbrow and a bit like we'll look down on the rock stuff because it's
Yeah.
easy and it's simple. But then I was like, but this harmonically, this stuff is really complex when you break it down. You start analyzing it. You have to have ears to come up with this stuff, and I think
Yeah.
ultimately that's the biggest thing. It doesn't matter how much theory you know or how much technique you have. It's all about it's all about having something that is really tasteful and unique in a sense.
I feel like this has been how it's been for kind of music like this, whether it's metal or grunge or alternative rock or anything that it is, as far as the kind of like putting your nose down at this because it's not Beethoven or because it's not scales or it's not anything like that. And like you're right, it's just because that these people weren't trying to, slaving over a desk writing, in sheet music and stuff like that doesn't mean that they themselves weren't some sort of musical genius. It was just applied in a different way that maybe isn't measured through, fucking like people with music degrees and stuff like that, right?
Yeah, man, absolutely. And I just think I think everyone can. There's something to be said about doing something simple, but doing it incredibly well is
Mhm.
just as hard as playing something incredibly complex.
100%, dude.
But you're at 100% capacity CPU all the whole time, and I just think that's not as impressive as someone who's really just mastered the song or
Sure.
or just plays something flawlessly and just something that's really simple and again maybe more impactful because you have a bit more time to process the information that's coming at you. If
Yeah.
it's like a million notes and it's really really like blah, 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 then it's like I've just something's happened, but I don't know I don't quite know what happened, but I've just been assaulted
Yeah, and I mean,
publicly.
there's nothing wrong with that because I enjoy my technical death metal and my necrophagia style type of stuff. And there's a really cool band that released an album a couple years ago called Ophidian Eye. Can't remember where they're from. I think they might be from Iceland, but it's a kind of like Mega Man 400 beats per minute type of stuff, but they do it in a way where it's like, yeah, they're throwing a lot out, but there's still like waves of song and stuff like that to where like you can go back and like, oh, there are actual songs in here as opposed to, just, throwing everything out there and exploding your mind. And that's the point of the song, not to actually get into a music but just to,
Yeah.
oh, wow, be amazed because, we were listening to, I'm sure that you're familiar with A.A. Williams, right? Being out from in the UK. She has a cover of Radiohead's "Creep," which how many different people have tried to fucking cover "Creep" because of the simple chords and stuff like that. But when you listen to her version, she does it in a way that makes sense, and you hear this thing that's been you almost don't want to listen to a cover of that song because it's been fucking done to death. And how many people can actually do it either better or different than Radiohead, and it works. But like that's another one where it's like kind of like what you're talking about. If you play out Fell on Black Days with 5 different guitar players, you can have a million different guitar players play Creep, and most of them are probably not going to be very good, despite how good the player is.
Absolutely. I mean, it happened with Nora Jones, who did a soon after Chris Cornell passed away.
Yeah.
And it was just insane, like so good. And it was just her and a piano. Yeah, to go back to your previous point, I think there's definitely I agree. I think it's more on the first listen. Like if you, on the very first listen, how quickly you get something.
Yeah.
And I feel like the simpler something is, the easier it is to get it on first listen. I think the more complicated it is, the more it's like, I think I'm going to have to give that another, you know what I mean? I think I'll have to listen to that one again, actually.
And that's so hard to do, because obviously it's easier said than done, right? Oh, write a simple song, but yet that is good and earworm or something like that. But even,
well,
I mean,
write a simple song that has some unique elements to it.
yeah.
Because again, the more elements you add, the easier it is to kind of be creative. And because you're just like, oh, we'll throw a tambourine here, we'll throw a guitar lick here, we'll throw a synth here, we'll blah, blah, blah. And you just build this thing. But to do something really unique and special with just 4 elements, for example.
Yeah.
Just like guitar, bass, vocal, drums. That's all you're allowed. And that's where stuff like the tunings and again, you have to be creative with the grooves and yeah, I mean, we take massive inspiration from that, just what to do with space.
Yeah.
Because it's a bit of a cliche, but obviously the notes.
It's about
you
the
don't play-
notes you don't play, right? That cliche.
Yeah, they're just as important, man. Like, if not more important.
This song specifically, right?
Mm.
How many different versions, whether it's like a piano, whether it's fucking mariachi, whether it's country, whether, you know, whatever it is, have there been out there because of just how good the arrangement of this song is? And it's not like, yeah, you can have the Soundgarden version, but you can take any style of music and make this song into that with still the same similar emotions and similar feel and everything like that. And I think that is the biggest fuck you to, you know, the people at your uni who are snubbing their noses at that, because that's fucking music, right? Taking something and being able to do it, whether it's singer-songwriter or ambient or whatever it is, like, that's a song. And I love that shit. One of my favorite like little corners of the internet is Metallica covers with different instruments and shit like that, because despite them being like thrashy and stuff like that, you can hear fucking like so many different like string versions of Master of Puppets and stuff like that, right? And it works because they got the arrangements down and they got the songwriting down, and it works. And that's what I think is the biggest takeaway for that. And this song is incredible.
But I 100% agree, man. Like I mean, Metallica. Like, I mean, you could do an entire orchestra arrangement of one,
and they have.
And it just sound,
yeah.
Exactly. I mean, S&M like that.
Right.
That I mean, of course, like if maybe before they did that and you heard about it, you'd be like, what? They're going to be playing with an orchestra, and then all of a sudden you see it, and you're like, oh,
yeah, dude,
I get it. And it's the same, like, and I think it comes down to, like you were saying, about the arrangements being so strong, the harmony being so strong. Because, like I say, this song, harmonically, could easily be a jazz standard in terms of it's the actual chord progression and the movement between each of the chords, and here's a big word, the chromaticism.
Yeah, I actually know that one. I know what that means.
Yeah, well, there you go. That entire first opening chord progression is just all a chromatic kind of movement down the fretboard.
Yeah,
and the Beatles did it. Classical music does it, and that is, I think, is a big part of why this song in particular is so timeless, and of the obvious reason why it's the biggest song Soundgarden probably have.
Yeah, it's transcendental, isn't it? Or it transcends you almost. Like even the second that, you know, I heard those intro guitar chords, and I don't know how many fucking times I've heard the song. It's obviously, like, you know, growing up in the 90s and, you know, and then and then into the 2000s, like it was fucking everywhere. And I don't think it's lost its impact, at least not for me. I can't speak for anybody else who maybe is tired of Soundgarden or doesn't like Soundgarden or was around at that time. It's like, I'm fucking sick of this song or whatever. But for me, I still get those chills when the chords start and everything like that. And I think, you know, it is kind of like, oh yeah, cliche Black Hole Sun Soundgarden, but it's like sometimes it's there for a fucking reason, people.
I mean, it's some things you can't really argue with, man.
Yeah.
And I just think musically, I think any musician who's serious, and I mean serious as in like really enjoys the just the art of creating music and writing music, I think anyone can appreciate maybe not, I wouldn't, maybe some people might not think it's genius. I mean, I think it is, but might not appreciate like just how clever that just opening chord progression is. And maybe they will look down at it because they say, oh, he plays in drop D, it's a bit like one finger. And it's like, well, go on, you write Black Hole Sun then. And I'll wait.
I think just because of the time that I grew up and everything like that, Black Hole Sun had to have been the first Soundgarden song that I ever heard, subconsciously or not. But I think this was the second one. I think this was the first one where I was like, oh, like there's more songs than just like that one that you always heard. And originally, I don't think I was too big of a fan of this one. I thought it was a little bit too repetitive, but man, I changed my mind on that one.
To me, it kind of, again, it's kind of bare bones almost songwriting wise, like typical. If you were going to study it, it'd be like, okay, call and response. I'll do it, and then
Yeah.
you have this kind of this response to it. And I just think this song is, again, it's just a masterclass in what you can do with some really simple elements, but the riff's super creative. Like there's not really another riff like it. Time signature wise as well. Yeah, exactly. Like bar 4, bar 3, and yeah, bar 4, bar 3, or 7/4, or something like that. But it doesn't feel like that because
No.
at the end of the day, you can bob your head, and the head bobbing doesn't stop. I think the big thing with time signatures, and I think the key to nailing odd time is if you can maintain that head bob. I think that you can get away with murder, basically, in terms of bar lengths and all sorts of stuff.
They were saying as far as like they didn't adhere to time signatures when they were writing, or it's not like, oh, we're gonna do this and this time. To your point, that's what you have to do, right? Because inherently they weren't thinking about timing or this, they were just thinking about the groove and keeping it like this part right here with the drums.
Exactly, yeah. And I think, oh yeah, I know. And I think a lot of it is, again, it's a feel thing, to be honest.
Yeah.
They're not thinking, oh, this bar length needs to be longer to fit in with this time signature we're playing it. It's very much like, well, we'll just do this because it feels good. And what was interesting is they all contribute to writing on guitar, and every member writes on guitar as well. But it requires a really specific dynamic for that to work. There can't really be much ego in the room.
Very much so.
And to be honest, I remember there's a band I love called Big Wreck, who are Canadian. The guitar player Ian Thornley, he said, there was a quote that he said that I really liked, and he said the biggest ego in the room has to be the song.
I love that. I've never heard that before.
Yeah. And I think that has to have that dynamic if you're going to have 4 guitar players inputting, because your ego as a guitar player is like, yeah, I wrote this riff, and then for someone else who plays guitar come along and go, yeah, maybe change those 2 notes though.
Yeah.
And you have that decision in that moment to be like, yeah, but no, it's my riff, or all right, like let's collaborate, and obviously one's a lot healthier.
To tie this into Giant Walker, I imagine, so if all 4 of you met in music school, I would assume that all of you are very proficient in many other instruments than just the ones that you play in the band. Is that correct?
I think some people more than others.
Okay.
Like for example, Alex is very much he dabbles in guitar, but I think it's still. He wouldn't mind me saying it's a bit more rudimentary. Yeah, but he's a killer drummer, and that's where he spent most of his time. But
I gotcha.
Jordan, the bass player, plays a bit of guitar. Steph plays a little bit of guitar as well, but she plays piano as well. And
okay. I was just curious about, because like obviously sometimes having a band full of, music school people is not necessarily the best thing for exactly the reasons that you mentioned earlier. There's like, I want to do this, or I'm going to do this, or I'm going to be this person. So I was just curious. I'm like, obviously now it's worked itself out, obviously, because you have 2 albums you've been playing for a long time. But I was just curious on if there were a lot of people playing a lot of different instruments and how that would work, and finding the dynamic of the band and stuff like that. I don't know if you had any stories with that, if it was hard, or if it just kind of like naturally gelled the way that it was, because y'all being mates and everything like that.
I think the latter, to be honest. Like I think we all just get on, so we're all best mates basically. So I don't think we've ever had a massive falling out before, or like had too many bickers or whatever. And I think at the end of the day, that just comes from finding a group of people that are just really on the same wavelength.
Sure.
And I think that's quite rare.
The hardest part,
quite rare.
Yeah.
100%. Well, I would go so far to say as it is the hardest part in terms of being in a band. I think, how many times have you heard a band splitting up because of musical differences? Or,
right.
I think finding people that are on the same page and all have that mantra, if you will, like the biggest ego is the song. Like it has to be, and I think we're all really good at just recognizing what has to be done for the song.
Yeah.
Not putting stuff in the song just for the sake of it, just to stroke an ego.
You got to sort of. I'm very
much. Yeah, 100%, and I'm very much like not a guitar solo-ish kind of guitar player. Like I love playing a solo as much as the next guy, but I mean, of all the songs on the new album, for example, there's probably like 3 out of the 9 that have guitar solos
and you don't miss them. It's not like, oh, there needs to be a solo here, or like, oh, this feels like the song is incomplete because it doesn't have a solo. It's like you don't need them,
Yeah, exactly. But in terms of like, for silhouettes, for example, it's very much like the end. It's like, well, as a songwriting tool, like, well, what would it be like if it was kind of like a jammy kind of outro, almost like Dire Straitsy, Pink Floydy thing,
Yeah.
and then all of a sudden it's like, if you go at it from that angle in terms of a vibe, like the guitar solo is there for because it's a vibe. It's not.
Yeah.
Here's me doing a guitar solo, you know. So yeah, I think that's the big one.
And I'm glad that you brought that song up because I mean I think it's probably my favorite song on the record, and obviously it's it's the title track of the record, which I'm sure means that y'all love it as well. Can you just tell me a little bit about like how y'all kind of created that song and the kind of memories it evokes for you, like in the studio and putting it in? Because like honestly, man, for people that I know that haven't heard you, I'm just like, this is the song that you want to start out with, and then you can kind of go back and do that. Because for me, I think it is like, here is kind of the nutshell of everything that they do. It has that massive chorus, very like impactful lyrics, and it sounds good. So now that I'm done licking your asshole, please tell me about how this song kind of created, how y'all created this song.
Stop it. To be honest, it started in a bit of again, kind of, it normally starts with a guitar riff.
Mm-hmm.
In this case, it started with an idea that I had for quite a while. It was just a chord progression. But then I was kind of teaching, because I teach guitar as well, and I was teaching one day, and I was teaching a well-known song in the UK, and it's a capo on the 2nd fret. And I was just in between kind of teaching students, and I just stumbled on this chord progression, which is the very start of the song, that acoustic passage. And I just loved how I always kind of wanted to have a song that kind of started on a dissonant chord. Again, similar to like this if you link it in with Soundgarden, like Black Hole Sun, that opening chord is quite dissonant and quite like, it's almost like a question, and then it's then answered and resolved later on. So I kind of wanted that kind of feeling of hanging, and kind of, it's in a moment of dissonance, but then there's some moments of resolution within it and whatever. And from there, honestly, like writing the rest of the song kind of doesn't really, I can't remember it too much. It just, because it happened so quick. And I think that's the power of a really good idea.
Yeah.
Because I think a really good idea, the DNA for the whole song is in that one idea. It's just about kind of milking it out a bit and
sure.
Just trying to work on it a bit. But apart from that, that was it. It literally was demoed really quick. That was a song where I wrote most of the instrumentation, including some of the vocal melodies and stuff.
Okay.
And you'll not want to hear those original
the original demos that you're doing on them
of me, of me like
maybe
some of the melodies, but.
On the 20th anniversary version of that album, we're listening now, you can put those out on that.
I'll release the voice memo just of me humming into the phone.
Sure.
But yeah, man, and I think ultimately, I think that's another thing as well. Like, certain songs are really collaborative in terms of being written, and some are just really singular. Like I've basically written everything from top to bottom in all the parts. And I think when you have such a strong idea, and you have a strong vision of where it could go, I think they're the ones that are really helpful to just try and see through to the end. Yeah. And then show people.
Sure.
I think sometimes you can, if you have a strong idea of where it's going and someone hears it too early, they might try and come into the writing process maybe too early and try and change it. And you're like
guessing yourself too.
Yeah. And I'm like, no, I can see it going this here though. Let me take it here first, and then you can have your opinion on it, kind of.
Yeah.
Thing. So.
No, that makes sense. On just like with any piece of art, right? Just sometimes you get stuck and you have one piece and you're like, I don't know where this goes. I like this one piece, but where the fuck? What comes before that? What comes after that? Like what? But then other times you're just like, okay, no, I could see not only the tunnels and the road ahead in my headlights, but I could see the end of the tunnel as well. So leave me the fuck alone for right now, and then you can have your deal with it.
That's it, man. Yeah, it's absolutely. Like you can 100% show an idea to someone too early. It's that classic. I can't remember what film. There's a film where like someone's writing a poem and someone's like, "Oh, can I read it?" And they're like, "No, it's not finished yet." And it's that same thing. It's like sometimes the song is just not ready to be shown to people, even even bandmates?
Maybe you have this answer, maybe you don't, but I'm curious, speaking for her just a little bit, would you happen to know what type of like music and influences Steph is into? Because I have my own thoughts from listening to this album, but I don't want to be reductive, and I don't want to like, oh, that's something that she like hates to get compared to, or something like that. So like, I'm just curious on like if knowing her for a little bit, because like there's a lot of different stuff that comes through in her vocals. I mean, she's just an amazing singer flat out to begin with, but then like you were saying, Giant Walker wears their influences on their sleeves, and I can hear things that I am familiar with and things that I might think she might be pulling from and stuff like that. I'm just curious.
Well, what's really interesting is that she could quite easily be here doing this instead of me, because she absolutely adores Soundgarden and Chris Cornell and all that kind of stuff as well. It's very interchangeable in that sense, I think, between especially me, Jordan, and her. We're all massive grunge fans.
Fuck yeah.
She's massively into Queens of the Stone Age.
Okay.
They're definitely one of her favorite bands. I think what's interesting about Steph is that a lot of her favorite bands are male singers, and I think that's, I don't know, maybe something comes from that in terms of, because like I say, it starts with imitation, doesn't it? When like it being inspired by something. So I don't know, her voice trying to imitate some of these kind of famous male singers.
Yeah.
Which that dynamic is quite interesting to think about. But I mean, when she was younger, when she first started getting into music, she was massively into Evanescence, and I mean, Amy Lee's a big one. And then later, she started getting into people like Leanne La Havas, Madison Cunningham, and people like that. Again, though, having bands that are kind of all over the place, all over the spectrums, healthy. Because,
no, absolutely. I mean, I think it makes people better musicians. My simple brain picks up a lot of like Amy Winehouse techniques and stuff like that in her. I don't know if that's conscious or not or anything like that. I was just curious because she could do things with her voice that are just like, what are you fucking doing right now?
She's vegetarian, maybe that's why.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's the power of the spinach.
I think one thing to add to that is that it's all one music. You know, like that might be a bit of a cliche, but I think there's so much crossover between the genres where, like you say, Amy Winehouse and stuff, like jazz singer. I mean, Amy Winehouse never sang a metal song, but I guarantee if she did sing a metal song, it would probably sound sick. Even something like Paul McCartney, for example, from the Beatles, you wouldn't say he's a rock singer, but then if you listen to Helter Skelter by the Beatles, and he's just screaming all over it, and it's like, hang on, this is the Beatles we're talking about. This is literally like a heavy tune. I think that's why one of my biggest bugbears is the idea of genres, to be honest. Like, I'm very much like, just listen to it and see, because I feel like genres really give people a bit of a ill-informed presupposition to like the album. It's like you immediately paint a picture of what it might be because someone's like, oh, it's a rock album. And it's like, okay, I'll listen to it and you're coming into it being, I'm going to listen to a rock album, as opposed to someone just being like, just listen to this and see what you think.
Yeah, and that's why, I mentioned that, like, I feel Giant Walker is a little bit uncategorizable right now, because, you could say there's progressive in there, you could say that there's heavy alternative and stuff like that, you could say that there's metal in there, but, like, is it all of those things? Yes, but is it any of those things? No, not really, right?
Yeah. Like I say, as long as if you like it, you like it. It doesn't need to be... Like, well, to take Metallica, for example, are Load and Reload like metal albums, like thrash metal albums? Like,
they're not thrash metal albums for sure.
Well, exactly, but Metallica are...
Metallica, right.
Heavy metal, thrash metal, exactly. Yeah. They're Metallica. They're just Metallica. And I just think taking each band as the individual item that they are is more healthy than being like, listen to this metal band I discovered the other day. And it's like, people will draw their own conclusions.
Of course, and everyone will have their own opinion. I mean, like, you just had, I don't know how many people throwing their phones at the mention of Load and Reload, right? Because it brings up so many, like, emotions, but I also know people that are like, dude, I fucking love Load and Reload. Like, that's what got me into Metallica, and then I went back and, listen, fuck yeah, dude. Honestly, I will say, like, Reload, I like Reload better than Load, and I think Reload has fucking a ton of bangers on it, and is a really underrated Metallica album. But that gets back into just, like, taking everything as it is, right? You know, I get it, right? Music, especially like heavy music or alternative music or music that is away from the norm, is very intensely personal to a lot of people, right? So when you feel like you know a band or they do something different, your identity changes a little bit and changes hard, and you don't know how to deal with it or whatever. But it's just like you can like certain things from a band and not like certain things from the same band, and then you could even like, oh, I used to like this band and now I fucking hate them because they're dog shit, but I still like those other ones, and they can just do whatever it is that they do. Just
Absolutely. If you don't have that variety in a back catalogue, like for example Radiohead or someone like that, like the first two albums are just nothing like that. Their latter stuff, it's far more like kind of synthy elements and all that kind of stuff. And I just think, yeah, you have to have a bit of variety, even on the same album as well.
4th of July, to get it back to Soundgarden, this song is about an LSD trip that Chris Cornell took, which, God bless LSD.
I just think that's so funny. Like the fact that having an LSD trip on the 4th of July and thinking that the world's ending because of all the fireworks and like all that.
Dude,
and it's kind of is like, imagine the terror of just bright lights and loud noises, and you're just like, oh, what?
Especially if you forgot or didn't know what's going on, right? You're just like in your own little world and doing your own thing, and the next thing it's just like fucking Stalingrad. Oh shit, it's like the bombing in Dresden.
Man.
Oh my god.
Yeah, absolutely. It just shows the kind of the spectrum of his lyrical content. I just think it's so varied but always super clever in just the way it's delivered and phrased. Like I say, like maybe you wouldn't. I mean, I don't know if the first impression I got when I heard this song wasn't of an LSD trip.
Certainly not. No.
I mean, what even is this song? You know what I mean? In fact, that's not even Chris Cornell singing. That's the bass player, Shepard. And it's almost like a little palate cleanser.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I was going to say, especially after the last song, or the last couple of songs actually have been kind of grungy and sludgy. Like, we didn't talk about, but Limo Wreck, I think, is probably about as close to Alice in Chains as Soundgarden gets as far as sonically. And just like having that, you know, spoon band Limo Wreck, The Day I Tried to Live, brings you down, and you have the nice little palate cleanser of Kickstand. But then this one is almost like a Spoonman reprise because it's got that kind of folky, tribal, rhythmic, what's it called, like a DNA to this song that gives it a way different feel.
Absolutely. In part, again, bringing it back to the kind of alternative tunings, this is one of those ones where I think the tuning very much informs the song, to me at least, that this idea would not be born out of standard tuning. It's just not what would come to mind if I was playing.
Jamie, we've done it. We've made it. We're on the last song. This is...
Whoa!
Yeah, this is Like Suicide, which, again, as we talked about earlier, when you know what happened to Chris Cornell and the way that his journey ended, and then look at this, you're like, oh, shit. But I believe that this song is about a bird that slammed into his window that he had to kill to put it out of its suffering.
Again, the genius of the lyric is, initially, it sounds so much darker than that, because you think, or at least I thought, that he was talking about a person.
Yeah, very much so.
Like killing a person, and it sounded so like murderous, and like killing almost like a girl or something, like she died just like suicide. But then you read that and there's a bit more innocence to it after that, and it's almost born out of mercy, like a mercy killing in a way.
Yeah,
and
very much.
I just think that's so like. Yeah, that's just really sad, I guess. But again, like it's kind of put across in a much darker way. Yeah, I just love the vibe.
Well, the vibe and the turn of phrase in this song as well, because the chorus is "she lived like a murderer," which, again, when you just look at it from the song, you're like, wow, that's pretty dark. But then it's about a bird, and a murderer is, a group of crows and all that stuff. It's, she lived like a murderer, but she died just like suicide. It's like, oh my God, that's just so... I don't, like you said before, I don't know if he meant to do that and if that's something, but when you analyze it beforehand, it's just that couplet right there is just so good, and just a microcosm of the rest of his lyrical work throughout the entire album.
Yeah, I couldn't have put it better myself, really, the way you summed it up. I just think the subtlety in the meanings behind things. It's ambiguous enough for you to infer your own meaning in things. But then when you are told exactly what it's about, you're like, oh, of course that's what it's about. Like,
Sure.
it's about killing a bird, like mercy killing, like it's floating
Yeah.
through his window. And like you say, the murder of crows, and you're like, oh, it's just the most stunning play on words.
Yeah, seriously, it is. And like exactly, like it's something that the artist means and it's kind of like a magic trick, right? When you find out how they actually do it, you're like, "Oh, well that's actually a little bit disappointing." But then you had your whole like, "Oh, how do they do this?" Like this, you had your own story about it, and that's what I love about art, man. And you'll hear artists tell this about is like, they release something out in the world, it's no longer theirs anymore, it's whoever's, and they hear all these different things like, "Oh, I didn't even mean that." But again, it gets back to our lived experiences, man. Like we all have different ways that we have experienced the world and how we've grown up and what we've gone through that's going to inform how we interact and think about the world, and it's going to be different regardless of anything. So
Absolutely. I mean, I think for me as well, like songs, I'm sure you're exactly the same. Any music lover, I feel like, is the same, where songs that are basically the soundtrack of your life, and they become kind of close companions in that you can find refuge in, either in tough times, in happy times, in whatever the weather. You always have those songs that you go back to, and they kind of change with you as well. Like the way you feel about a song the first time you hear it versus the last time you hear it.
Yeah.
I feel like your feelings towards that song are going to be very different. In terms of like, if let's say you're in a relationship and you have a song that you both really like, and then that relationship maybe tragically ends, and then you're like, oh, well, that song is like, has that baggage attached to it now.
Yeah.
And it changes the way you feel about the song. And I just think that's so unique to everyone, whoever listens to.
It's what I think that every artist should aspire for. Or maybe not every artist, but I'll put on my pants and wear my balls and say, like, yes, I think that's what every artist should aspire for, because, like, what is art if not something that should be timeless and grows with you and all of that other stuff? And that is that's why we're talking about this album. What is it? Yeah, 20 years later now. No, 30 years later now. Holy shit.
All right.
To do that album 30 years later, Jamie, and still find things that you either didn't know or hear a lyric differently or hear a production technique. I mean, it's incredible. I don't know. It's just, you can't plan for that. I mean, you can a little bit, but it's just like, I think that that's what everyone should try to aspire to, and obviously easier said than done. But yeah, Super Unknown, what a hell of an album, dude.
Yeah, I've thoroughly enjoyed this, man. Like I say, I've never ever tire of listening to this album. And I just think there's so many nuggets of just wisdom and there's always, it's one of those albums where every song has been my favorite song at some point.
I love that.
And there's kind of a song for any situation for me as well. Like in whatever mood I'm feeling in, I can probably listen to a song on this album and just really find solace in it. And it's got me through just tons of shite.
Yeah, and you're still here, which I'm sure that Chris Cornell would be very happy to hear that. And it's I think that's one of the, even again, so many layers of sadness to this, but if the people that like you, like whoever else has been impacted by this album, by this band, by whatever else Chris Cornell has done, or maybe they found their way into music from Soundgarden and then found their other favorite band that way. I feel like if the people that he helped, which are so many to count, were able, and he knew, like, if he was able to hear from all of those people, I don't think he would have done what he did. And it's just so sad, but I'm sure that he would love to know that this got you through plenty of tough times and you're still here and still rocking it and still being influenced by it and still finding stuff on there. Yeah, man. So, my friends, if you're feeling bad or down or anything, I get it. Always, reach out to someone. There are different hotlines that you can do, and just whatever you can, my friends. Let's stay on this earth. Please and thank you, everybody.
Yeah. Amen.
Yeah. So, Jamie, last thoughts on Soundgarden. I have one last question that I want to ask you before we go, but
Sure.
your last thoughts on Soundgarden, on Super Unknown, and recommendations if people dug this album, aren't familiar with Soundgarden, where they might want to go next, either in discography or whether it's like Audio Slave or Chris Cornell's acoustic albums, which are also really fucking good as well. Last thoughts and recommendations on this one.
I mean, the next obvious step would either be an album forward or an album back. So Down on the Upside's the next album, or Bad Motorfinger, the album beforehand.
Mm-hmm.
Bad Motorfinger was actually the first Soundgarden album I heard.
I think it's a really good intro to the band because then you get what they were doing before they go into Super Unknown.
Yeah.
Not that you have to do that, but I think it's a good way to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think they very much made their name with Bad Motorfinger and then kind of went to the moon with Super Unknown.
Yeah.
But Bad Motorfinger, I would say, is the next Soundgarden album to check out if you like Super Unknown. And then after that, I would 100% check out Audio Slave's first album.
Oh, it's so good. We
because I
didn't
just
even
think-
talk about Audio Slave through here and how, like, honestly, like I was, again, just given the age that I was, Audio Slave was really my first foray into Chris Cornell, and Like a Stone and I Am the Highway are still part of my that musical DNA we were talking about. Like I can listen to those songs all the time. They're in all of my favorite playlists, and I could just I still get teary-eyed listening to those ones.
Absolutely, yeah. Likewise, man. I think they're just stunning songs, and I mean, I can't even comprehend seeing the first single from the album Cochise and seeing the music video on MTV. And I remember seeing it for the first time, being like, "What? Who is this?" They're just
Yeah.
on top of a building, fireworks going off, like
Yeah.
mega riff. Cornell's like absolutely killing it, tearing his leather jacket off in that, and I'm like, this is the best thing I've ever seen. You know what I mean? So,
Yeah, I think the fact that you had the members of Rage Against the Machine minus Zach De La Rocha, and then the singer for Soundgarden, and yet they still made a thing that is talked about as its own entity, where it's like, yeah, I mean, it's Chris Cornell's son for Soundgarden, but like they were able to completely shatter all those expectations with everything else. I think is just a mark to how good both that project was in that album. I'm not too familiar with Audio Slave's stuff after that, because obviously that was the big album when I was in middle school, beginning of high school, and everything like that. And personally, I don't need any other album. I'm fine with just that one.
Audio Slave starts and ends with the first one for me.
There you go.
I mean, the other albums are decent, but they kind of feel to me like the same thing, but less inspired almost.
Cool. So since this is, I do want to ask you this before we go, because we're a couple months removed from Silhouettes being out. So you've had, you've had the album release show, you've had, some time to let all that stuff sit in. And I just want to know, man, like how is little Jamie feeling about where he's at right now? After this, you've got 2 albums out. You've got, a tour is going to be coming up soon. You're going to, I assume, going to be striving to now get the next album on and everything like that. Like, how do you feel right now as far as your musical journey and how you've grown? Not even just from, the beginning of when you started playing with your mates and then Giant Walker and all that other stuff, but just from releasing your previous album to this one.
Yeah, well, just grateful, content, and like I say, having 2 bodies of work that I don't, nothing about it I regret. They're all snapshots in time where we were as people, and that ultimately is special for me. Where when I'm decrepit and old and I'm sitting in my armchair, I can look at those 2 albums or however many albums I have at that time.
Yeah.
And I can point them out to my family and I can go, I was in a band. I did those. And,
do you remember when my friends and I were playing
Yeah.
the middle song and it was real fun? It's like, all right, Grandpa, let's get you back to the nursing home. huh?
Exactly. But that's honestly like what I think we'll all look back long after the band with fond memories of those 2 albums. And I think it's the you're creating memories at the end of the day. And I think that's what I'm kind of most pleased about.
Fuck yeah. I love that. And, I think, again, that's another thing that artists should strive for is just being happy and having their name on something that they put out and just look back on and be like, yeah, fuck yeah, we did that. No matter what else happens, we have that. But I am positive that the good times are just now getting started for y'all. I think that I'm sure that plenty of people are going to find Silhouettes, and you're going to have more people at your shows from that. And I can't wait to see what y'all do going forward, and just keep doing what you're doing. Man, like all that goes for all of you. The jump from All in Good Time to Silhouettes is great, and I can really hear y'all rounding into form, and I think that y'all have even better things ahead of you.
Thank you, man. I appreciate that. Likewise, man, you're doing a great thing, shedding light on much needed great music. So
Yeah, I appreciate that. It goes both for you and for Soundgarden, and I'm an album whore, so like I want to listen with albums, and as you can see, like I mean, fuck, like almost 2 hours just flew by because
man.
I've noticed that artists don't really like to talk about themselves all that much. Some of them do, a lot of them do, but when you can like get them out of their shell and talk about something they really love, hey, I learned so much more about Giant Walker today than I would have ever known not doing this, you know?
Yeah,
Fuck
man.
yeah.
Every day's a school day.
Well, Jamie, thank you so much for jumping on. I appreciate you so much. Good luck in the future with everything that you're doing. And congrats on the album. And one of these days, I don't know whether it's going to be in the UK, in the US, or in Europe, or whatever, we'll see you on that stage, dude.
Oh, hopefully, man. Appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Listen to that gorgeous little Jamie Southern guitar solo on the outro of the title track to Giant Walker's excellent new album, Silhouettes. Go stream it wherever you stream your music, and then when you fall in love with the album, go pick up a copy from your local record store, from Giant Walker's Bandcamp, or from churchroadrecords.com. Massive thanks to Jamie for surviving through so many technical issues in that episode and coming on to listen to such an incredible album. There is plenty to dig into in that one over and over and over again. So whether you've heard it before or not, I really hope you dive back into it on your own time and then go on to explore the rest of what Soundgarden has to offer. And keep an eye out for Giant Walker over the coming years, as I am sure that you're going to be hearing their name more and more often as they continue to write and record. That's all I've got for this episode, everyone. Thank you so much for hanging out with us today, and thank you so much for supporting the show. Thank you so much for supporting the show. We'll be back next week when Benjamin Mainwaring of the noir pop band The Nightmares comes on to listen to Blink-182's self-titled album. It is very much a clash of styles in this one, but it does make for some riveting conversation. So come along and join us then. I will hope you tune in. Otherwise, check us out on Instagram at Spinning the Wax. You can follow me at StayPuft_Malo, and you can go over to patreon.com/spinningthewax to support this show directly. You can get early access of these episodes right here, as well as uncut versions of the album listening part of the show, so you can listen to along with your favorite artists, as well as new music updates every week and exclusive content and more. So go over there, check us out. If not, if you liked what you saw, please give us a like and a subscribe and share this with your friends. Word of mouth is so huge right now. But until then, my friends, I will see you on the other side. Stay safe, stay sane, stay heavy, stay puffed.